Hello there, this is Eye on Africa. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Biahi. These are the top stories on the continent. Troops led by Libyan strongmen Khalifa Haftar announced they've recaptured two key oil sites of the country's east from rival forces who seized them earlier this month. Doctors in Kenya signing a call to end a pay strike over working conditions that have paralysed public hospitals for 100 days. And in the Malian capital, Bamako, experts gather for an international conference on how to protect cultural artefacts from looters and smugglers. In Libya, forces loyal to strongman Khalifa Haftar say they've retaken two key oil terminals in the east after launching an offensive against Islamists. Well, air, sea and ground forces were deployed to seize Ras Lanuf and Essida after both sites were taken by a rival group earlier this month. Well, meanwhile, in Tripoli, fighting is raging on as a rival government struggles to assert its authority. Since the 2011 ousting of leader Muammar Gaddafi, rival militias and governments have fought for control of strategic areas. France 24's Nicolas Germain reports.
These men in Benghazi call themselves the LNA, the Libyan National Army, and obey strongman Khalifa Haftar. They said on Tuesday that they had recaptured two other areas, the vital oil ports of Ras Lanuf and Essida, from Islamist-led forces known as the BDB or Benghazi Defense Brigade.
The enemy is inside the damaged buildings. We're firing on all the buildings directly, this row and the ones behind it. All those are under their control. God willing, we will start with this row and you will see the direct hits.
The group we are currently fighting, every time they try to escape, we manage to kill some of them. God willing, it's either death or prison for them.
The UN says fighting in Libya's oil coastline region this month has been marked by human rights violations. It received allegations of the summary execution of two LNA fighters. But the United Nations said Haftar's forces had also reportedly committed crimes.
LNA fighters beat and insulted men and women and stole money and other property from their houses. They've detained boys as young as 13 years old and men in their 70s. In one case, the LNA detained a 13-year-old boy who was held in order to force the family to hand over his older brother, who was suspected of being a fighter aligned with the BDB.
General Haftar and his forces oppose a UN-backed unity government in Tripoli. He has close ties with Russia. In January, he was given a tour of a Russian aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, in the Mediterranean. Last week, the pro-Haftar Eastern Parliament suspended its participation in political dialogue and called for a presidential election to be held before next February.
Kenyan doctors have signed a deal with the government to end 100 days of strike action, which crippled the country's public health system. Well, doctors had called for a pay increase and improvements to dilapidated health facilities. They also want Kenya to address a huge shortage of doctors. Well, the government sacked some medics and repeatedly threatened to fire others if they didn't return to work. A short time ago, I spoke to our correspondent Lenny Ravuga in Nairobi.
A sigh of relief on all sides. The doctors have won a Pyrrhic victory, I must say, while the government is happy to have given the best offer, in their words, taking into consideration the budgetary constraints, they say, at the moment. So the doctors have walked away with a 40% pay rise. They were garnering for a 300% pay rise, but that was not the case because of budgetary constraints. The two contentious issues were the return to work formula, which has been ironed out, and the collective bargaining agreement, which has been ironed out, but in phases.
Now, Lenny, for those doctors who were sacked for striking, does this order still stand? Because it seems that such a directive could potentially cripple Kenya's healthcare system.
You're quite right, Rochelle. Over 2,500 public facilities, health public facilities, have been affected by the strike that began on the 5th of December last year. So you would take into account that the doctors who were fired had entered into a clause in the return to work formula stating that no victimization shall occur or befall unto them and all the disciplinary action which had been commenced shall be revoked. So in a way, it's a victory for the doctors, and the ministry head honchos who were at the lead of this agreement have sighed a great heave of relief, saying that the country has been in a dark place and they're very happy to get the health system back on its feet. So no repercussions on the doctors who were on strike, who had partaken in the industrial action. So it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Lenny Ravaga in Nairobi a short time ago. Well, next, let's get a look at some news in brief. Somalia's regional government has said it's sending in soldiers to free an oil tanker hijacked by pirates off the coast of Somalia. In the first such hijacking in the region since 2012, the Aris 13 sent a distress call on Monday, then turned off its tracking system and altered course. Well, the vessel was carrying fuel from Djibouti to Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, when it was approached by two men in skiffs. The UN warned in October that pirates had the capability to resume attacks. An inquiry into a June 2012 plane crash in Nigeria that killed 153 people on board and others on the ground has faulted the pilot. A report by Nigeria's Accident Investigation Bureau says the Dana Air MD-83 lost power of one of its two engines 17 minutes into the flight from Abuja. The pilot then reportedly flew on with neither him nor the co-pilot following any emergency procedure checklist. And the Ethiopian government has declared 3 days of national mourning after the collapse of a mounting of garbage outside of the capital on Saturday. The death toll has now risen to 72. Many of the victims were women and children. It's not clear how the collapse occurred. Residents say, though, the dumping of rubbish resumed at the site in recent months. This after protests at a newer landfill site. In Mali, an international conference about how to protect cultural artefacts from looters and smugglers has opened in the capital, Bamako. Well, experts from Iraq, Syria, as well as Ivory Coast and Burkina Faso are participating in the event. In Mali, rare manuscripts and works of art have been targeted by smugglers. Authorities are struggling to control the situation. Our correspondent sent us this report.
During Mali's civil conflict in 2012, these ancient manuscripts were hidden and saved from rebel groups who wanted to burn them. But now they face a new danger: looters who steal and sell artifacts like these for collectors, mainly in the Gulf states. These texts are currently on display at Mali's National Museum, but other rare works are still under threat.
Since the conflict began in Mali, there are entire regions, particularly in the Sahel, where the state no longer has any authority and where acts of looting have become completely rife. For example, in an area called Douentza, 1 or 2 years ago, there was a huge raid at an archaeological site, and there was no real action we could take against the looters.
The international police force Interpol has only ever stopped a few items leaving Mali through the airport. There's no specific agency to target artifact trafficking, although everyone's aware of the problem.
We know that drugs are just the tip of the iceberg, but in the same way that drug trafficking makes certain people very rich, so does smuggling artifacts. We haven't identified organized groups yet, but we've already targeted individuals who've made a lot of money doing this.
An exhibition is now on at Mali's National Museum to highlight the work done by the UN's Cultural Protection Agency, UNESCO, and other groups who fought art smugglers and helped preserve Mali's heritage for generations to come.
That's all from Iron Africa for today. Stay tuned, though. Coming up next, more world headlines.